Welcome to Behind the Surface, seeing beyond what the eyes see. We are both psychics who perform clairvoyant readings. Through our exploration in this arena, we have become privy to a different level of understanding. Our podcast is supposed to be thought-provoking, not a debate. Nothing we ever say is fixed or final, and it's theoretical.
In episode 3, we're going to talk about knowledge versus knowing.
So when we get into our meditation space to do clairvoyant readings, we're in a space of absolute non-judgment where pure information comes in, and we never second guess it, right, Lisa?
Absolutely not. We have to believe everything in front of us is truth. It's up to the readee to decide what they are going to do with the information. Sometimes, and I'm sure you have too, Alice, have had a readee that disagrees with us. But that's just them trying to reason with their own narrative, really. It's they have a fixed narrative and it just, whatever we're reading doesn't match it, and they get upset.
To it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we know if it's coming in, it's truth. And this is why we trust our inner knowing.
Right.
We have to believe that that is truth, even if it doesn't match narratives that we want to see come true.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I'm thinking, what am I looking at?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're like, okay, this is where we're going.
Yep, absolutely.
So Lisa, recently we had a conversation about a metaphysical book club you were a part of a few years back. Mm-hmm. And you seemed to become aware of the difference between what you and I call knowingness and intellectual knowledge. You want to talk more about that?
Sure. So prior to really gaining this wisdom, which is, coming from internal sources, I had only read a very limited amount of spiritual books, philosophical books in the spiritual arena. So I really didn't have intellectual knowledge on spirituality. So when I joined this book group, it was really interesting. Now, mind you, my inner knowing guided me to this group. Mm-hmm. So there was a reason I was there. And I'm glad I was there. I really loved the community, and it was really interesting for me on many levels what I learned there. And to be honest with you, most of my learning there was through other people, not the books, and how they operated. So I got to see myself within all the members of the group. But that's another story in another episode of something. So what I found in that group is that, to me, it was really interesting because I had this internal knowledge that I trusted and didn't debate at all. But what I found in the group is that there was a lot of intellectual debate on what was truth. And I thought this to be interesting. I was like, this is interesting. And prior to this group, I would tell people, as a result of my meditation, I just know how to operate in the world. I just know how to be. And I didn't know how to put words to that. And I didn't know that there was a title for this information I was getting either until I entered this book group. And I realized that what I was operating from, or what my knowledge was called universal knowledge or universal truth. And what was interesting was listening to these different perspectives through these books of universal knowledge that came to each of those individuals through their own interpretation of that truth. Mm-hmm. So that to me was like, wow, I found this.
Oh, right.
Right? I found this. And that to me was really interesting. But the idea that there was debate and comparison, that kind of blew me away. It was very heady. There was so much time spent in the brain. And when someone's eyes are furrowing or they get upset or want to attack an idea. And I can't attack any of the beliefs that come to me because to me, they're truth and they sit well within me because they're embodied. They are embodied. I have taken this information from source, and we'll get to that later, and embodied it, and I live it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the folks who are reading the books, some of them had internal knowledge as well, or levels of internal knowledge, and they were just comparing what they knew internally to what was related in the books. So it's not I wasn't the only one in there who has, cracked the code a little bit, I'd like to say. So, that was my experience with the group. I'm eternally grateful for the group and for that experience. Do I feel like I want to go out and read a bunch of metaphysical books and spiritual books? Not really, because you and I both spend a lot of time leaving our brains and putting aside information that is not our own, that we're either reading. So I'm careful about what I read. I'm careful about what I consume because it's more time to let that go, more processes with the tools that we have to let go of some of these ideas or concepts that are brought in front of our faces. So I'm careful. Yeah. So, yeah.
So when you're talking about your own knowingness, it sounds like you're talking less about a personal point of view or even an instinct, and more about claircognizance.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah. And that's the ability to just know.
Yeah. I'm going to read something that I found, and I thought this was quite interesting. It said, the Buddha taught that wisdom is the understanding of the true nature of reality. That understanding comes from seeing things as they really are. To develop wisdom is the ability to see things clearly without judgment. That's the key, isn't it? Without the distortions of our own biases or preconceptions. We call these our filters, meaning our biases and our preconceptions.
Right. And some of us have a lot of filters. And these are the beliefs that others have put in place for us as we grow up in this world. I kind of see them as a series of walls we have to break down so we can see what's on the other side of the wall.
Or what's on the inside.
Right. Oh, yeah. And so I see it as behind each wall, there's another wall, and we have to break that down. But we broaden our thinking each time we do this. And it's a part of our journey to consciousness maybe. Whether we can ever fully obtain that's the question, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the walls that we put up start pretty much about 5 or 6 years old. And it's not intentional. During these times, we're developing our sense of self, And if we want to find higher consciousness, there's some of us in the second half of our lives who start breaking those walls down, or filters, as we like to call them. Mm-hmm. Then there are those who are probably afraid to remove those filters. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to remove those filters, to let go of beliefs that we've been operating on in our entire lives that connect us to our friends and our family and our educational institutions and really society as a whole. And this part of the evolutionary journey can feel lonely momentarily, because it feels like we're separating from everyone, but really we are a part of the whole. We're just operating on a different vibrational plane as a result of this. It's the people and activities that you once enjoyed, you might not anymore. And that's hard too. But again, when you start to trust yourself, meaning your internal guidance, before long, new friends come in and new activities that match your new vibration show up. So it's only just this illusion of separation. And it happens many times. I mean, at least for me, it's happened many times over the years in my process of evolution where, I'm out in the world and then all of a sudden crash, a new level of understanding comes in and I hide out for a little while and then I'm back out in the world again.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like kind of what you're talking about is how we build up our ego in life. And then there's a certain point, and it's usually around midlife, and that's our midlife crisis, where we start to dismantle those things. We just start to dismantle those filters and the things that other people taught us. And try to find our own way.
Or people continue on with their vices, which keep us from seeing how things really are.
Right.
And they could literally, like all the distractions we have in this world, like prevent us completely from looking inside. You and I have been eliminating certain things for quite some time, like alcohol, caffeine, and sugar.
Right. Those are the things that a lot of people would just consider food, right?
We've all used consumption as a drug to prevent us from looking in.
Right.
You can also add TV and sex to the list. It doesn't mean you can't have those things. It's just people get obsessive and excessive is probably the better word about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you really want to know yourself, it's an interesting experiment to see yourself without caffeine and alcohol. It's where you'll find yourself, just you, all by yourself.
I'm getting to know me.
Yeah.
Some people get to know themselves, though, through practices like meditation and yoga, or they may even find the avenue towards their inner self through a trauma or life-threatening illness.
Like us, we both had traumas that led us here.
Oh, yeah. But what a gift.
Yeah.
But for most, it happens slowly. For some people, they have spontaneous spiritual awakenings that completely dismantle their belief systems. Lucky them.
Yeah, right, huh? So getting back to claircognizance, I'm older than you are, but you're usually slightly ahead of me with certain spiritual or metaphysical concepts. And I feel like I'm always trying to catch up to you. So I feel like I might feel a little bit like an interviewer in these podcasts.
Oh, gosh. Alice, stop it. So our abilities are different. And my claircognizance is definitely more developed than yours, but our clairvoyance is right on point together. That we all have powers within us, and they're all different, but we all have these abilities that are masked by all our beliefs. And one of my strengths is claircognizance. I know in your readings, I'm sure you have abilities and strengths that are stronger than mine, but I'm not in your readings, Alice.
Right. Nope. Yeah. Sometimes I actually like working my analytic brain to figure out certain things. Like when it comes to my own art practice, I really like the thinking process. But sometimes it's really nice to just know something and not have to torment myself by making decisions.
I wanted to discuss this. I went back to college in 2013, I believe. And I wrote for 2 years. I had to really unpack everything that I had experienced as a result of my awakening process. And what I did is I wrote for 2 years, and I used both my inner knowing and my analytical knowledge. I used my brain. And
That's a good combination.
Amazing. I went down the rabbit hole. So I was guided by my internal knowledge, and I would go and I would go to the library, or I would research on dissertation databases, and I would know exactly where to go by my internal knowing. Mm-hmm. And the weaving of information was it was beautiful. And I'm not a writer. Let me preface that. I am not a writer, but there was something that my inner knowing, my internal compass guided me to this school. I didn't need to go to school. I had a career. I already went to school. I really didn't, but I needed the forum to write. And it was just amazing how the both came together. Something that, like, to find 10 prime sources could take people months or weeks. It would take me hours.
Literally,
because I just trusted the information. I trusted it, and it was a beautiful process. So that's a good explanation on how to use both, and what the benefit is to crack open and look in and find your internal knowledge.
Sounds like you let yourself be in the flow.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. But circling back to making decisions from knowing. A decision is something that is good for you at that moment. Knowing is seeing everything the way it is and knowing what needs to be done for the greater good.
Right.
So I believe that everything to do with internal knowing it's coming from a vibration of how do we put this, of doing good in the world, or just being your best, And it's if we trust it and don't bend it to the narrative that would suit our egos, we're in the flow.
Yeah. Yep. So I know that sometimes you feel like this information, the knowing, comes from somewhere outside of yourself. Where do you think that is?
Well, first of all, it's not outside of yourself. It's very much inside of you. But there's a way that I believe that the information comes into our physical bodies. Our spirit is in our bodies, but the information comes in. So this is all theoretical. And I'm sure some of you are saying, if you understand universal knowledge, you should know. Well, let's just remember, let's use a level of humility here. I'm probably at kindergarten level at the, in this arena, but in where we are in the world, this is probably like having a PhD. So we all get information from inner knowing, whether you know it or not. some people rely on books or people like priests, rabbis, shamans, philosophers. Psychics are mediums who listen to source. Let me repeat that again. People listen to these people because they get their information from source to receive universal knowledge. In a nutshell, I believe we're one intelligence. We're all one intelligence. And we come into this planet and we have these unique filters. And let me talk about filters real quick. We have two different kinds of filters. We have filters that are above our head that make us an individual in this lifetime. And then we have filters in front of us, in front of our eyes, that society has kind of imposed on us.
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Yeah, So I hope that helps you. So I believe that our pure internal information comes from source, which comes in through the crown of our heads. But before it goes through the crown of our heads, it goes through these filters that we all have when we was via birth to make us individuals. Because I believe we are here to express as individuals. Otherwise, there's no other reason to be here because we're one intelligence. I also believe that part of my belief is that we're here to dismantle some of those preconceived ideas on how we're supposed to be in this life to get to our internal truth, which is kind of rediscovering home, where we come from. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't. But all I know is that as a result of dismantling a lot of these constructs and belief systems, I'm a much happier person. And as a result of that, everyone around me has changed. Every single person around me has changed. Family, friends, and if they haven't changed, they're just not in my life and they're on a different path, which is wonderful too. And they're probably doing their own healing on a different vibrational plane. So that's my 2 cents.
So you've talked about being able to recognize when someone comes up with an answer to something for themselves versus learning it from someone else. Through a book or something else that someone else has told them or taught them?
Sure. I call it I feel and see an energetic tell. And it's kind of fun to recognize it. I notice when someone speaks their truth from internal knowing, they tend to have a sparkle in their eyes. And their energy is different too. They tend to be more excited when communicating their own ideas. And it's also a grounded excitement. It's not like this overly enthusiastic excitement. It's a very practical excitement. So I don't know. And then I find when people are discussing things purely on intellectual concepts, the energy can be flat. And Alice, you're a collegiate educator, so you know what I'm talking about. It's just redigested information.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I remember one time I was driving somewhere with my nephew and he said, "Alice, I think I know what happens to you when you die." And I asked, "What?" And he said, "I think when you die, another person is born." And then I told him that was called reincarnation and that some people think that we might be born again as an animal or an insect. And he got there on his own. And it blew his tiny little developing mind. But the fact that it had a name and other people believed the same thing connected him to the world outside of himself.
Yeah, knowing this can connect us to everything, but it could also make us feel like we're going crazy. Some people seem odd. There's some people out there who aren't signing on to our social mandates and constructs.
They don't fit in.
They don't fit in. And it could look like madness. And you know what? When you are going through one of these awakenings, you might feel like you're going mad too. And I've had clients contact me who are going through awakenings who thought they needed to be institutionalized.
Yeah, they think they're losing it. Yeah,
they do. And then as time, as you give it a little bit of time, there's an understanding and embodiment. But there's this phase in between that sometimes people just lose it. But then, when you circle back and you look at Tesla, Einstein, Gandhi, they all clearly tapped into universal knowledge. Those folks were there to for the accolades or money either, right?
Right.
And they didn't care what other people thought of them. They were really on the forefront. Once you understand your purpose, you know how to go out there and execute it. And we all have a purpose. We all do, even if it's to be the greatest mother out there who makes the most fabulous sandwiches for their kids at lunch. But we all have a purpose.
And you gotta find it.
Yeah. And I kind of look at it like we're part of the ant farm. And if everyone knew their purpose, we would work in perfect synergy. And that goes not only for just like at the basic home level, that goes for the community and for the globe. I don't know. I can go on and on. But from what we understand as psychics, from looking in so much, we do know not everyone is supposed to attain universal knowledge while we're here. And that's okay. Otherwise, I think, I look at this life like it was a game. The game would be over.
And maybe that takes us back to the topic of reincarnation.
Oh, boy. I think maybe that's a topic for another podcast.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.